talking about him with you. I have the sense of your organization as such an amazing group of people, and I really admire all of you. And he loved this organization and mentioned it often, and you know, respected and admired your work and your life experience. I was scheduled to meet up with Howie in Santa Monica last winter, and that didn't come to pass. Well, I was in Santa Monica for a number of weeks, and I don't know if you know this or if you've been there, but every Sunday, the Veterans for Peace in Santa Monica have the most extraordinary kind of protest exhibit on the beach, on the state beach. And, you know, dedicated people for years, every Sunday, have been hauling out hundreds and hundreds of crosses on these kind of flatbed little trailer things, and setting them up early in the morning, rows and rows and rows of them on the beach, with some caskets with flags over them in the center, and then photos of young people who've died, who've lost their lives to war, posters with beautiful faces on photos. It's an incredible exhibit, very moving. And I didn't get to go there with Howie, but I went every Sunday, and the veterans were lined up at a table with literature and CDs and all kinds of materials. And that state beach in LA, although Santa Monica is a wealthier area, that state beach attracts people from LA who are going to the beach for the day. Very diverse, many people there looking like people who could easily get recruited for the military. So it's a really effective and really important thing that they're doing, because they're just talking and interacting with all the people who are wandering around on the beach. I didn't get to share that with Howie, but I thought about him every single time I was there, and it helped during that period, actually. So I moved next door to Howie and Roz in 1973. So we actually were friends for almost 40 years, all of us. And you know, our families became close. Their grandson Will used to come over pretty often and play, and my boys were the same age, and they'd all play together. So our families became close, and you know, it was, you know, 35 years ago, so I was just beginning to become a political person. I was just beginning to think about the world and think about justice, social justice issues, and war. And there was a built-in tutor in my neighborhood, because we all hung out in the neighborhood a great deal. There were two family houses very close together, and we all sat around in the yards talking. So I got this political education that was transformative for me, coming at a time when I was waking up and helping me see the world in a very critical, analytical, and radical way that may not have unfolded in that exact same way had things been different. But it was, his influence was really pivotal in my own personal political development and growth. And interestingly, has gotten passed on in different ways to my own family and through my own work, which is in peace education at Lesley University, where I teach. But I used to, when we first lived next door to each other, you know, I would go to sleep at the reasonable hour of 10 or 10:30 or something, which is what I've always done, and I had little kids and had to get up early. But if I woke up in the night, I would look out, and there would be his light on in his study, because it was the room opposite my bedroom at an angle. That light was on at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning in his office. And he was teaching at BU. And I was thinking, when does this person doesn't sleep and has a phenomenal amount of energy. He was riding his bike to BU in those days and coming home and riding all night. Wow. And I remember, you know, in these early days, one day, encountering Howie in our shared driveway, and his face was just full of anguish. And he had been reading the original journals of Bartolomé de las Casas in his office, the person who wrote the direct accounts of Columbus's arrival in the New World and treatment of native people. And he was, I mean, he was very, very, very upset. His face was twisted with emotion. And he began to tell me what he was reading. And he was so affected by those atrocities. And so was I, because it was 1974 or 5, and it wasn't so common knowledge then of what was the real Columbus story. It was the first time I had heard it. Standing there in the gravel driveway on George Street, the first time I heard the true story of Columbus and his treatment of Native people. Anyway, so the book came out in 1980, and Howie gave one of the first copies to me and my sons, and he inscribed it, to Nancy, but especially for Kyle and Matt, love Howie. And I came home with the book, and I opened it, and I began to read out loud to my boys the first chapter, which they wanted me to keep reading. It was the Columbus, what's the title of the chapter, remember? Columbus's Arrival in the New World, or the Columbus chapters, chapter 1. And I read it out loud to them. They hung on every word. And then, you know, Matthew was 10. And I had no idea then that that little 10-year-old boy was going to grow up to be a young man who would write a screenplay with a tribute to his friend Howie. Matt adored Howie and Roz both. But the fact that he was going to write a screenplay and write in a line, he was going to make sure to write in a line that mentioned the people's history of the United States and Howard.
Great line, too.
And it's a great line. If you can sort through all the profanity, it's great. So we had the premiere of Good Will Hunting in Boston, and of course I invited Howie and Roz. And I had read the screenplay numerous times and talked with Matt about it and been part of the process. But Howie didn't know, so when they came in, I said to him, "There's a little surprise." Then, you know, we all watched the movie, and he loved the movie, and he was, you know, he was thrilled that that line was in there. And it was such a kind of quirky and unusual way to acknowledge him, you know, just not what he's was used to in most areas of life. But he loved it, and you know, that film put Howie's name and the book out into places it might not have gone. And it also was one of the many other factors that helped guide some future projects. And people, you know, learned about Howie and his work and messages to some extent from that one contribution. But one of the places it helped to lead to was The People Speak, which I hope you've seen, and if you haven't, I hope you will see. And that film really did consume, although I see not totally from this book, probably others.
Well, actually, he'd written most of this before, so.
Okay.
But he was consumed with The People Speak in the last years of his life.
He was consumed with The People Speak for the last few years, and he absolutely loved everything about it, the performances and the events and the film shootings and the meeting people and preparing for the readings. And I talked with him constantly about it, and it gave him so much joy and fulfillment at the end of his life. And my son Matt told me when one of the producers, who was so grief-stricken after Howie died, Matt said to him, "You gave him a victory lap at the end."
That's right.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.